Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So continuing with our discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966, Chapter 14, Struggling Alone. So now Prabhupada is in New York at Dr. Mishra's yoga studio. He's living there, going to Dr. Mishra's house for cooking. And the house wasn't just next door, like 7 blocks he had to walk every day. So that was certainly true, but what could he do there with no money or support? He was thinking of staying for only a few weeks and then going back to India. In the meantime, he was working on his Srimad Bhagavatam manuscripts, walking in Manhattan and writing letters. He was studying a new culture, calculating practically and imagining, hopefully, how to introduce Krishna consciousness to the Western world. He expressed his thoughts to Sumati Morarji, October 27th. So far as I have studied, the American people are very much eager to learn about the Indian way of spiritual realization. And there are so many so-called yoga ashrams in America. Unfortunately, they are not very much adored by the government. And it is learned that such yoga ashrams have exploited the innocent people, as has been the case in India also. The only hope is that they are spiritually inclined and immense benefit can be done to them if the cult of Srimad Bhagavatam is preached here. Srila Prabhupada noted that the Americans were also giving a good reception to Indian art and music. Just to see the mode of reception, he attended the performance of a Madrasi dancer, Bala Saraswati. I went to see the dance with a friend, although for the last 40 years I have never attended such dance ceremonies. The dancer was successful in her demonstration. The music was in Indian classical tune, mostly in Sanskrit language, and the American public appreciated them. So I was encouraged to see the favorable circumstances about my future preaching work. So his understanding was, yes, people do like Indian culture, Indian spirituality, everything. So he's hopeful. It will be favorable. He said the Bhagavatam could also be preached through music and dance, but he had no means to introduce it. The Christian missions, backed by huge resources, were preaching all over the world. So why couldn't the devotees of Krishna combine to preach the Bhagavatam all over the world? He also noted that the Christian missionaries had not been effective in checking the spread of communism, whereas the Bhagavatam movement could be because of its philosophical, scientific approach. So communism, just like Russia became communist country, although it had big churches. Communism means no religion. They don't follow any religion. No God, nothing. Just the government is everything. So this is what Prabhupada said. Christian missions, they could not check the spread of communism. But Bhagavatam can, because of its philosophical, scientific approach. He was deliberately planting a seed of inspiration in the mind of the devoted, wealthy Sumati Morarji. November 8th. Prabhupada wrote to his godbrother Tirtha Maharaj, who had become president of the Gaudiya Math, to remind him that their spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, had a strong desire to open preaching centers in the Western countries. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had several times attempted to do this by sending sannyasis to England and other European countries. But Prabhupada noted, without any tangible results, I have come to this country with the same purpose in view. And as far as I can see here in America, there is very good scope for preaching the cult of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada pointed out that there were certain Mayavadi groups who had buildings but were not attracting many followers. But he had talked with Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, who had given the opinion that the Americans were suitable for Bhakti Yoga. I am here and see a good field for work, but I am alone, without men and money. To start a center here, we must have our own buildings. If the leaders of the Gaudiya Mutt would consider opening their own branch in New York, Srila Prabhupada would be willing to manage it. But without their own house, he reported, they could not conduct a mission in the city. Srila Prabhupada wrote that they could open centers in many cities throughout the country if his godbrothers would cooperate. He repeatedly made the point that although other groups did not have the genuine spiritual philosophy of India, they were buying many buildings. The Gaudiya Mutt, however, had nothing. If you agree to cooperate with me as I have suggested above, then I shall extend my visa period. My present visa period ends by the end of this November. But if I receive your confirmation immediately, then I shall extend my visa period. Otherwise, I shall return to India. So this was his plan. So 2 months were ending in November, and if nothing works out, he said, I have to come back to India. November 9, 6 p.m. While Prabhupada sat alone in his fifth floor room in Dr. Mishra's yoga studio, the lights suddenly went out. This was his experience of the first moments of the New York City blackout of 1965. In India, power failure occurred commonly, so Prabhupada, while surprised to find the same thing in America, remained undisturbed. He began chanting the Hare Krishna mantra on his beats. Meanwhile, outside his room, the entire New York metropolitan area had been plunged into darkness. The massive power failure had suddenly left the entire city without electricity, trapping 800,000 people in the subways and affecting more than 30 million people in 9 states and 3 Canadian provinces. So this had happened in 2003 also, when I was in Detroit, and all of a sudden, power went out. And here in America, we are so much dependent on electrical power. So without electricity, no traffic signals will work, no gas station or petrol pump stations will work, no shops, because everything is dependent. And even in the grocery stores, when we were there, they took out everything from the freezer and kept it on the street for everybody to take, because they knew everything will go bad very soon. And at home, no cooking can be done. Everything is by power. So phones did not work. Even the centers, they didn't have power. So it's basically life comes to a standstill. You're just lame person without power. And the same thing happened when Prabhupada was there in 1965. 2 hours later, a man from Dr. Mishra's apartment arrived at the door with candles and some fruit. He found Prabhupada in a pleasant mood, sitting there in the darkness, chanting Hare Krishna. The man informed him of the serious nature of such a blackout in New York City. Prabhupada thanked him and returned again to his chanting. The blackout lasted until 7 the next morning. So sometimes this electric grid, they just get overloaded or something happens, and the whole grid, whole North, East America, including 3 Canadian provinces, no power. In India, we are used to it, but it doesn't hurt as much as it hurts in America. Srila Prabhupada received a reply to his letter of November 8 to Tirth Maharaj in Calcutta. Prabhupada had explained his hopes and plans for staying in America, but he had stressed that his godbrothers would have to give him their vote of confidence as well as some tangible support. His god brothers had not been working cooperatively. Each leader was interested more in maintaining his own building than in working with others to spread the teachings of Lord Chaitanya around the world. So how would it be possible for them to share Srila Prabhupada's vision of establishing a branch in New York City? They would see it as separate attempt. Yet despite the unlikely odds, he appealed to their missionary spirit and reminded them of the desires of their spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Their Guru Maharaj wanted Krishna consciousness to be spread in the West, but when Prabhupada finally got Tirth Maharaj's reply, he found it unfavorable. His godbrother did not argue against his attempting something in New York, but he politely said that the Gaudiya Mutt funds could not be used for such a proposal. Prabhupada replied, "It's not very encouraging. Still, I'm not a man to be disappointed." In fact, he found a little hope in Tirth Maharaj's reply. So he described to his godbrother the property he had recently found for sale at 143 West 72nd Street. The building, only 18.5 feet wide and 100 feet deep, consisted of the first floor store, a basement, and a mezzanine. Prabhupada presented Tirth Maharaj the price, $100,000, with $20,000 cash down payment, and remarked that this building was twice the size of the research institute in Calcutta. Prabhupada conceived of the basement as a kitchen and dining area, the first floor as a lecture hall, and the mezzanine as personal apartments, while a separate area for the deity of Lord Krishna. Appropriately, Prabhupada had described himself as a man not to be disappointed. He was convinced that if there were a center where people could come hear from pure devotee, the genuine God-conscious culture of India could begin in America. Yet because he had made his plans dependent on obtaining an expensive building in Manhattan, his goal seemed unreachable. Still, he was persistently writing to prominent devotees in India, though they were not interested in his plans. Why should they not help, he thought. After all, they were devotees of Krishna. Shouldn't the devotees come forward to establish the first Krishna temple in America? Certainly he was qualified and authorized to spread the message of Krishna. As for the place, New York was perhaps the most cosmopolitan city in the world. He had found a building not very expensive, a good location, and there was a great need for Krishna temple here to offset the propaganda of the Indian Mayavadis. The Krishna Bhaktas to whom he was writing understood Lord Krishna to be not simply a Hindu deity, but the Supreme Lord, worshipable for the whole world. So they should be pleased to see Krishna worshipped in New York. Krishna himself said in Bhagavad Gita, "Give up all other duties and surrender to me." So if they were Krishna's devotees, why would they not help? What kind of a devotee was it who did not want to glorify the Lord? But Srila Prabhupada did not judge beforehand who would serve Krishna's mission and who would not. He was fully surrendered and fully dependent on Krishna. And in obedience to his spiritual master, he would approach everyone without discrimination to ask for help. There was Sumati Morarji. She had helped him in publishing Bhagavatam and she had sent him to America. In a recent letter to her, he had only given hints. "I'm just giving you the idea," Prabhupada wrote. "And if you kindly think over the matter seriously and consult your beloved Lord Balkrishna, surely you will be further enlightened in the matter." There is scope and there is certainly necessity also, and it's the duty of every Indian, especially the devotees of Lord Krishna, to take up the matter. But he had received no reply. He had not heard from her since Butler, though her words to him had seemed prophetic, and they had struck with him. "I feel that you should stay there until you fully recover from your illness and return only after you have completed your mission." Now Sumati Morarji must do something big. He told her point blank, "I think therefore that a temple of Balkrishna in New York may immediately be started for this purpose. And as a devotee of Lord Balkrishna, you should execute this great and noble work. Till now, there is no worshipable temple of the Hindus in New York. Although in India, there are so many American missionary establishments and churches. So I shall request you to do this noble act, and it will be recorded in the history of the world that the first Hindu temple is started by a pious Hindu lady, Srimati Sumati Morarji, who was not only a big business magnate in India, but a pious Hindu lady and great devotee of Lord Krishna. This task is for you and glorious at the same time. So somehow Prabhupada is trying to convince Mrs. Morarji to give him the money to buy that building. He assured her that he had no ambition to become the proprietor of a house or temple in America, but for preaching a building would be absolutely required. They should have association of bona fide devotees of the Lord. They should join the kirtan glorifying the Lord. They should hear the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. They should have intimate touch with the temple or place of the Lord, and they should be given ample chance to worship the Lord in the temple. Under the guidance of the bona fide devotee, they can be given such facilities, and the way of Srimad Bhagavatam is open for everyone. He informed her that he had located a building just suitable for this great missionary work. It was ideal, as if it was built for this purpose only. And your simple willingness to do the act will complete everything smoothly. The house is practically 3 stories, ground floor, basement, and 2 stories up, with all the suitable arrangements of gas, heat, etc. The ground floor may be utilized for preparation of prasadam for Balkrishna, because the preaching center will not be for dry speculation, but for actual gain, for delicious prasad. I have already tested how the people here like the vegetable prasadam prepared by me. They will forget meat eating and pay for the expenses. American people are not poor men like the Indians, and if they appreciate a thing, they are prepared to spend any amount on such hobby. They're being exploited simply by jugglery of words and bodily gymnastics, and still they are spending for that. But when they will have the actual commodity and feel pleasure by eating very delicious prasadam of Balkrishna, I'm sure a unique thing will be introduced in America. So he's again and again using the name Balkrishna to convince Mrs. Murarji. Now, according to his plans, he had a week left in America. My term to stay in America will be finished by the 17th of November 1965. But I'm believing in your foretelling. You should stay there until you fully recover your health and return after you have completed your mission. So then he created this another pamphlet. Tagore Society of New York, Inc. cordially invites you to a lecture, God Consciousness, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Date, Sunday, November 28, 1965. Time, lecture 3:30 p.m., tea at 4:30 p.m. Place, New India House, 3 East 64th Street. A widely respected scholar and religious leader in India, Swami Bhaktivedanta is briefly visiting New York. He has been engaged in a monumental endeavor of translating the 60-volume Srimad Bhagavatam from Sanskrit into English. So somehow he found this society and they are arranging for his lecture. Daud Haroon had never met Srila Prabhupada. He was a musician living downtown, and he used to attend the meetings of the Tagore Society up on 64th Street. Daud. I went uptown and walked into the auditorium, and I noticed that the stage was empty and a few people were sitting towards the rear of the auditorium. I walked forward down the center aisle because I usually like to sit up front. Then I saw an old gentleman sitting over to the right, and he sort of drew me over to him. So I went over and sat beside him, and then I noticed he was saying his beads. Even though he had his beads in a bag, I could hear them, and I could see his body moving, and I felt very comfortable because this was something I was used to. As I was sitting there looking around the auditorium, he just turned around and smiled at me very nicely. He nodded his head and I nodded mine, and he smiled and turned around. Then he turned back to me again and softly asked me if I was from India. I said, "No, sir, I'm not from India. I'm from here, the United States." He turned back and he kept chanting with his beads. Then he turned around the next time and asked if I was a Hindu. I said, "No, sir, I'm not a Hindu. I'm a Muslim." And he said, "Oh, very good, very good. Yes, many times I hear the children in India reciting the Quran." And then he turned back around and his body was moving, rocking, and he was working with his beads. Then there were a few more exchanges of pleasantries, sort of intermittent. And then a lady came up on the stage and announced that the lecture was to begin. And if the folks could give the speaker a round of applause, they would welcome him to the stage. At that point, the man I was sitting next to put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Excuse me, sir, could you do me a favor?" And I said, "Yes, anything." He said, "Would you watch over my books?" I looked down on the floor and he had several boxes of books and an umbrella and several other articles. I said, "Yes, I would watch over these." And he says, "Excuse me." He walked up to the aisle and surprisingly, he walked up to the stage. And it was a man I had come to hear, Swami Bhaktivedanta. He walked up on the stage and introduced himself to the people and tried to get them to come forward. He said, "Come forward, come forward." A few of them came up to the front. They were mixed couples, many Indians, male and female, mostly middle-aged, and some college-aged. A lot of professor type and ladies were there. Then he began his speech. He drove right into it. He just started exclaiming, proclaiming the greatness of the Creator, and that the most important thing is to remember the Creator and remember God. He began to expand on God consciousness, what God consciousness is, and how God is everywhere, and how it behooves us all to remember God, no matter what we call him, what names we call him by, but that we should call him. He gave a demonstration which was very moving. He chanted Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, and spoke about the power and saving grace in the mantra. He took a little break about halfway through and had some water. The last thing he said as he was coming down from the podium was that he had copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He explained that he had been working on them and that they came in 3 volumes and was $16. Then he concluded and came down. A lot of people went over to him. Some were timid, some were enthusiastic. Some people shook his hand and were asking for books. At first, there were about 15 people gathered around him, talking to him and asking questions. With so many people around, he came over to me and said, "So would you do me one more favor? Will you kindly take over the selling of the books? People will be coming to you for the books. So you sell the books and put the money in this little box. And I'll be with you in a minute." I said, "Fine." So he engaged that person in the service. So while he talked to the people, others came up to me. They must have thought that I was somehow his secretary or his traveling companion, and people were coming over to me and asking me personal questions about him, which I couldn't really answer because I didn't know. Some people were buying the books or looking through them. So this went on, and I was trying to listen to him, carry on his conversations with people, and carry on the book selling at the same time. Some of the people were looking for a guru and trying to find out what he was supposed to do. Some of them were really interrogating him. But he just smiled and answered all their questions simply. I remember he told them, "You will know, there is no pressure. You will know if I am your guru." He suggested that people go over and read the books. And then the group dwindled down to about half a dozen, and a few remaining were just looking at him, and some were too timid to approach him. He walked over to them and spoke to them, putting them at ease. Later, he came over and we counted the collection, and I helped him pack up his box and carry downstairs the boxes of books that were left. As we parted, he thanked me very much, and I gave him my name and address and phone number and purchased a set of Srimad Bhagavatams. Wow. So any and every opportunity Prabhupada got, he preached, sold his Bhagavatam, and just help others. Okay, thus ends the chapter also. So tomorrow we'll start new chapter, chapter 15. We'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila.